Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Alchemist and Oracle, a space where we engage in spiritualized conversations that deepen understanding and inspire meaningful dialogue. I am Nicole, love the Oracle, and I am joined by my co-host, Warrioress Ardeshir, the Alchemist.
Howdy, y'all.
And today we're getting into conversation about, hold on, I turned the page. So today we're getting in conversation about spiritual amnesia. And I'm going to let my co-hosts take the reins here to start the conversation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for your presence here, and hope we can have a good time in this space here with you. We're going to talk about this thing called spiritual amnesia. What is spiritual amnesia from alchemist perspective? It's something that is not ignorance. It's something about identifying. Identifying with the, I don't know, wrong or incorrect layer of the self. It's something about like when our consciousness forgets the originality of who we are, the collapses of our natural personality, cyber through rooms, roles, and performance, and things of that nature. So it's like I'm very careful what I put I am in front of. We're talking about I'm this, I'm that, I'm a trauma, I'm a mistakes. And a lot of, the mistake thing is that we are not that. I am, we believe I am what somebody calls me. I don't do labels. You don't know nothing about me. And that's the same what you do for you. What am I when I produce? It's kind of talking about some of these with the limited beliefs and who am I if I'm lost. I don't believe we're ever lost. We're just continuing to discover who we are in this world. It's where we're forgetting that before all of that, we were the awareness. Like I said, where's key? Where's our essence? Where did we lose it? A lot of it still goes back to childhood, where we hold, forgetting this process. So it's like, think about that for a minute. So it's like, how did we forget who we are? How did we do that? The first thing that came to me while looking what had to do with conditioning. It's like, this is deep, deep, right? So from the time we were born, we were handed identities. Of course, even our names. Some of us stay with them. Some of us feel them. I've looked into my given, and I stand in the name that you see here on the screen. And we forgot through the conditioning. We were handled all this, and even it was talked about even with our major, which had to do with SOS versus solo paths. Let me give you an example. So that's why family roles, it captures, some religious and trauma responses. So from the family roles that I followed is I did like SOS paths, for example. And I think, oh God, Major Yala, and then mentioned something about SOS pads and Brillo. I forget, maybe SOS was cheaper than Brillo, but depending on the sale, you had either one in the house. And so you look at these roles as an example of how we choose, and I stay with them. Now we have pots where I'm not even using those type of metal things on them, but they're good for for example, for a cast iron skillet. Had to get that out. So just take that, so we've become through family roles, cultural roles, religious roles, and trauma responses that have been carried on, through generations, for example. It's like I didn't wake up this way. I decided to forgive myself, and we just adapted. And if we just adapted, to these roles, unfortunately. And the adaptation has been powerful, even though our life keeps us safe. Hold on a second here. There we go. So it keeps us safe. So we look at a time of where I dimmed myself. or where you dimmed yourself just to belong in a space. A time where we perform strength, and I know that oh too well, while feeling, fragile. Because there's times where we just have those moments. But then some of us just have to feel like we have to be this strong human being all the time because society looks at the fact that you might have a little thing that you're weak, and that is a lie. I just put it out there and say, it's a lie. It's not true. And over the time where we gave so much just to feel worthy in a space. That's kind of spiritual amnesia in motion or working.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So it'll come to a part where we forget through pain. Now that's a whole nother subject that I could have here alone, which is to talk about forgetting and persevering through pain. I mean, not only emotional, but physical pain. I mean, a dire straight pain chart that ain't even a 10, it's a 30. So we look at pain in the fragments of that as I look at how some of us just for the vulnerability here of that. When something kind of overwhelms us, we get to disconnect from the parts of ourselves to survive it. Just like you said about grounding all the time, and how important that is. This is not a weakness, it's the body's, I use the body, it's an intelligence that adapts into that. When we forget through pain, forget who we are through these challenges of life, you know. So we have to kind of find a way to return to that, and that's kind of later. But for example, we have, betrayal where we forget our openness. We have rejection. After rejection, we forget our worth. And after fear, we forget the capacity that we still truly have. It just means not now. So I might, if you watched our channel or whatever, have looked and mentioned somebody called oh my goodness, he has it. Now I can't think of his name. You might have to help me, my darling, because now I just slipped. Oh, John Maxwell, Reverend John Maxwell, whereas this thing called failing forward that I never got because obviously that's what happens. But we forget ourselves after that and what we do. And we hear this thing that makes us shrink, says shrink. And we just listen to that. So next is that we forget through over identifying with the ego. So I focus on the ego, right? And so the ego, everybody think is not, it's not some evil, it's structured to protect us in a certain way. But when the ego becomes the only voice, because we're talking about the difference between you and the other voice in your head, it's still between the good and what we say the evil, even though it's not. It's a way to protect that it becomes our only voice. It drowns out our true essence. So when I'm talking about aware of something, and I like these driving, I like these intuition things that tell you to do something or tell you how to move, and it comes to you first. And when we second guess that, that's the other voice. It's normally you make that first move behind a car. Left turns are a perfect example. Like when you see it in judging distance is really huge. And making that move, if you're not going to make it and you got the hesitation, you got to wait. I've seen it happen in that dynamic. So our ego would tell us, and this is when we get our answers to prove it. Let's compete. Now I like sports, I get it. But in life, this is not something that we want to do on it. Then you have your control, and then you have the protect. Always trying to protect. And God bless our mom and our parents because they want to protect. Always be careful. So there was a time later, oh God, within the last 15, maybe 20 years, I'll say, boy, that's a long time. Was it 20? I don't know. I started telling my mom, I'll say later, as you say, be careful on my trips and that. And I said, okay, I'll watch out for the other people because I know that if I be too careful, I have to drive the way I drive in order to survive what I need to get to, or say thrive. I prefer thrive. So, and then the essence of us is a little different. It says trust. Trust is number key. Oh my God, that's so key. And I know that I second guess. When you second guess yourself, that's not trusting your essence. And then the flow, getting into the flow. Then there's the creative side. This was essence, and then essence says to be. And you know, we talk a lot about to be. And a train is just be instead of do. Just listen to somebody talking about what is the to just be and just go in the flow and live the best life instead of trying to achieve what the world thinks you need to achieve, and that you're successful if you have a $50 million house with 55 rooms you don't use. I'm just saying, if you got it, you like it like that, no problem. No heat, no judgment. I'm just saying. Just saying. So the spiritual amnesia kind of happens when we confuse the protective self for the true self. Let that resonate with you for a moment. So, and I realized when people say lost, I said, I ain't never been lost and lose. I don't need to find myself. I just need to be myself. Just need to be absolutely, just need to be myself. You know, we just overdevelop a part of us that's just trying to survive. And like I had shared, one of my quotes is about to live your life instead of letting life live you. That's that. So that is honest. It's just that. So we get to a part where we forgetting is the part of remembering. So we have to come back to remembering ourselves. And as from the alchemic view, from my view, how I see it, it's not forgetting, because we look at that as a mistake. It's just happened to have been embedded in how we were raised, or how our parents or certain people tried to protect us the same way that they had, how they had to move in this world. You know, it's a journey from the truth that is what builds the capacity to conscious return. And think of it like that. And conscious remembrance is more powerful than the innocence of knowing. So when you're looking at that, is why silence or a child, because see, a child knows naturally. And so I've been looking at, because I had to go back and remember that people, I used to be a child. So if you go back and look at how you were, or your natural origin, just like I look at, I have my little guys in here, look at that how he functions, and how someone functions is that you just know. And as long as you just remember purposely or deliberately so. And that's the difference. You know, you got to go back. You got to look back. And when you look at your children, how they move, and you don't want them to do this because you did it this way or this way, you're tuning them totally out of their natural beingness. And then they end up being who they are. When we just need to allow, it's about allow them to be who they are, and not who you desire them to be in the world. Which allows them to be the best of the best that they can be. You know. So when I go back and I look at examples of what or how it was to be a woman, and I looked at how the dress, how uncomfortable it is to be. Where I looked at me, I was like, wow, they got it easy. Why it got to be so hard for me to walk in and be that person, or that just the human that I came into this world, the sole purpose is remembering that of who you were. This is somebody. So I looked at this whole dynamic of this and how we forget who we are. And it all begins at a younger purpose. If you can remember some of you who rebelled, if you looked at the rebellion is it didn't feel comfortable to you. Yeah, we got some people who rebel big time in there. So, you know, you look at that, you know, it's just kind of one of those things. And some of us, not so much, for the fear of being whipped, for the fear of getting in trouble. You know, we lose ourselves, our essence, our very personality, our very being, not able to speak. And as you come into this world, child, you're exploring, you're trying to get to know. And there's some things that seem just more natural when you're young that as adults, because the adults have forgotten who they are, that they can't allow, and they have us who we are, or not allow us. Like, why you do that? Why you speak that way? Why you walk that way? Yeah. You just are. So I will definitely be getting into the next one on how. So you have to kind of sit with these things. Then you have to go into stillness once again. Stillness connects you with your true self if you sit and allow it. But I know that my brain has 55 million things that wants to go through it because it doesn't want me to be still. The ego does not want me to be still. And not only that, sometimes when I speak, I have a tendency to connect a lot of different things. And sometimes I lose people, but people didn't figure me out. But the natural origin of, of how I connect things to other things. She laughed because she knows. I know, so I'm just keeping it real with you, right? So, and I have a few, so sitting in silence is key. You know, it has to be intentional. It has to be purposeful for you. And so I just went back into the egg, which I love it when I go out because my mind is elsewhere where it needs to connect and ground and make the shifts that I desire to have shifting in my body to become to my true self. So y'all gonna want to know what the egg is. It's called a harmonic egg. I went again in the area of Baltimore. God, I forgot what it is in a different, he's moved, but there is one here in the land, and you can look it up, harmonic egg. And I had such a dynamic experience almost 2 years ago on the 31st of July that I will probably be writing about the dynamics of the experience and the healing that occurred to come back to the original self before the world. Oh, freaked me up. So I use that word. So, and physical body and things of that nature. So I just say return to yourself. Take the time for you. Take the time to sit. Take the time to connect. It doesn't happen overnight because we've been going. And some of you know how your mind, especially as a active parent, or the time you have to take time for yourself. You know, the women of our day, and I believe it took time for themselves, but too, we were kids who worked in the house all the time. It was a whole different area, but you have to allow yourself that time. And we'll talk further about, and we'll say it at the end about how do you begin remembering who you are. And I'll have some reflection questions for this set at the end for you um, that I think you would appreciate. Um, so with that, I'll knock it over to my dear co-host. I'm our Oracle's protective and looking at spiritual amnesia in the body. The body connect.
Spiritual amnesia. How did we? I tell you, I came up with a topic and I can't even remember what it's. How did we forget who we are?
Yeah.
Spiritual amnesia. So there are. I always like to approach things from the reality of what's going on, and I think it can help people to understand what is influencing them. You know, if you have an understanding of the environment that you live in and how it's kind of like if you like I heard this guy talk about how important it is to have the playbook for the game of life that we're playing that so many of us don't have access to, and it seems like only a certain group of people that have this playbook, but I don't think that's really true either. But so I'm approaching it from that standpoint. There are three ways that I'm identifying for today's conversation, because I can like this can be this could be a topic for an entire channel talking about spiritual amnesia and unpacking how it shows up in life, like just digging deep. But for today, I'm going to approach it from the three ways that have spiritual amnesia has been inflicted, and in this amnesiatic state that we're in. And the way that this is inflicted is always targeting the spiritual when it comes to this infliction. So I'm talking about like what's the infliction, what is inflicted on us, and how it targets. It's always meant to target on a spiritual level because that's how you influence and impact people's mind, essentially. So amnesia, when we look at the word amnesia, the meaning of amnesia is partial or total loss of memory, usually resulting from shock, psychological disturbance, brain injury, or illness. Spiritual, talked about this before in previous episodes, but for today's sake, spiritual meaning affecting the soul. And the soul is one of peace and harmony and alignment and quality that makes us who we are. It's our true self, and thus a representation of our innate value that we have as the soul that resides within us as the spiritual beings that some of us are. So infliction, when I speak of infliction, it's defined as an act of imposing or meting out something unpleasant, emotional or physical. So when we go back to amnesia, because we're talking about amnesia, because I feel like that's the part that we're talking about, I'm going to talk about it from the psychological disturbance. I'm going to talk about the brain injury that is caused from this, and thus the illness. So it starts with the emotional infliction of psychological disturbance. And so psychological disturbance is relating to the human mind and feelings. And where it starts, and I have several things that I've kind of have identified how it can show up. I probably won't. Whenever I talk about these type of concepts, Zoom kicks me out. So that should tell you that what I'm speaking about is things that people in certain places don't want you to hear about, the things that I'm going to talk about. So rational thinking is the first thing. I think that's kind of ironic that was the part that I got taken out of here. This infliction is through that of rational thinking, and this comes from, like, where does the rational thinking come from? How is this inflicted? It's through religious beliefs, it's through conventionality, however that may show up, spiritual wisdom, education, and conformity. And so all of these these systems and structures and things of that nature, the rational thinking comes from that. The infliction comes from that on that level. And this is impacting you from your throat chakra, the throat chakra connection, and the Venus connection. And I'll tell you, I'm like, you're probably like, what does that mean? I got you. As I try to quietly turn my page here. That cracks you up every time I say that. So the Venus connection, I know. The Venus connection, when we think of Venus, Venus is about love and beauty and harmony, right? And Venus also, it represents like your relationships, it's your values, and also like your aesthetic preferences. So how you prefer to your environment to look and feel, how it feels pleasing to you. And the influence here from the rational thinking standpoint, when it comes to this love and this beauty and harmony, is there's an influence that impacts how we express affection, how we attract others, and finding pleasure in life. The throat chakra is in play here because literally your words have the power to both destroy and heal. And one thing to note about the throat chakra is that this chakra, where it's located, this is the entrance to the higher spiritual realm of things. So the throat chakra is that higher spiritual realm that is beyond this physical world that we live in. And one thing to note about the throat chakra is that it is also referred to as the mouth of God. This is where we can both hear and speak divine wisdom and give voice to our soul. So you might be like, okay, well, how is that being impacted? You have these religious beliefs, you have this conventionality, you have spiritual wisdom, education, systems, and conformity. All of those things are influencing causing infliction in your rational thinking that is impacting your throat chakra and your Venus connection, your capacity to see the love and the beauty. There's this infliction that is infecting, that's infiltrating on those two levels. There's this understanding of how words have the power to both destroy and to heal. So there's this influencing, this infliction that I see that comes from these systems and structures in place that I mentioned that are impacting that are causing that psychological disturbance that is thus spiritual amnesia. That's number one. Number two is, I'm trying to see where I want to go on the paper. Number two, the second one that I'm going to talk about is introspective consciousness. And so introspective consciousness is about your values. When it's aligned to your divine self, it's about values of love and nourishment. That's what I mean by introspective consciousness. So the psychological disturbance here, there's this inversion that has been inflicted to where there's a dependency and controlling when it comes to love and romantic connection. There's a lack of freedom in truth seeking and truly knowing the meaning of life. So going back to those systems that I talked about, religious beliefs and conformity and conventionality and even spiritual wisdom, like there's some spiritual texts that actually can cause this psychological disturbance as well. Mm-hmm. And how one can see this infliction is this is inflicted with the material world. And this is impacting, it's causing this imbalance with family and work. And there was like this obsession with status. So how this is being inflicted is there's using the devil, right? Using the devil to disrupt the peace that the soul seeks. And so there's this pragmatic, it's very pragmatic in the approach of this in using the devil, like the judgment. And this can look like doubting like God's love that's unconditional and judging. There's this twisting of scripture and writings to misrepresent the ultimate truth, and also justifying behavior that may be misaligned with the love of God, that unconditional love of God. There's also, it can look like appealing to perversions of sovereignty, of not relying on God's wisdom, but that of external understanding, others, intellect surpassing the divine revelation that you have within yourself. So it's this pushing this introspective consciousness that you have. It's like, no, 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 no. You need to seek it outside of yourself. So there's this infliction, there's a psychological disturbance that is coming in that is impacting this introspective consciousness that values love and nourishment that has been inverted. And the next one that I have written down is, and this is a big one. I probably should have led with this one, but this is the creative destruction through energy consciousness. And so this is on the psychological disturbance here. It's this creative destruction through energy consciousness that's flowing from the outer world, which is beyond this world, and thus essentially higher consciousness. And this is being inflicted, how this is showing up, how it's causing this psychological disturbance is that there's this energy manipulation or influence that is going on. And so there's this influence on our logical processes, decision-making abilities, and the way we interact with our environments. And so there's this push and this infliction towards or of judgment of the need for relentless self-improvement. Over analyzing every detail. And so that's how it's causing like this psychological disturbance, this creative destruction through the manipulation and the influence of the energy that we hold within ourselves that is there and can empower us in such a way. It goes back to the rational thinking that we have. That's tied to that Venus, that Venusian way of being, and that throat chakra of love and beauty and harmony, and is also like the mouth of God, where we can both hear and speak divine wisdom and give voice to our soul. There's this manipulation of that is happening through influencing our consciousness. And this also can impact our sense of abundance. And there's like financial control. There's like this pushing of like, you need to like save money and frugality, and like a fear of change, hoarding and greed can become that outcome from this energy manipulation and influence that is taking you away from the power that you have to create this financial abundance and wealth that we all have access to, but we're being inflicted. There's a psychological disturbance that is impacting that flow of abundance that we have through this creative energy that we have within us. I hope this is like making some sense here. And before I move on to the last point here, this infliction, when I'm talking about like the energy, the creative destruction through energy consciousness, is there's this infliction against energy, against community, the separation. There's this energy against community, teamwork, collaboration that's leading to creating conflict, poor, or even like a lack of connection. And there's so much power of community that allows for seeing the innate value of each and all. And there is a psychological disturbance that's happening with that's being inflicted to mess that energy up. No, You don't need to be in community. That person is doing this, that person is doing that. It's separating us from the thing that we're meant to be, which is in community, connecting and seeing the innate value that every person has within that community, not trying to make it more than that. And for time's sake, do I want to go there? For time's sake, I'll pause on the other one. I may do a breakdown, a bonus video breaking this down. But those are the psychological disturbances that I kind of came like out of just kind of observing and just through my own awareness of what is showing up in the world. And there's so many. So the next thing around spiritual amnesia is the brain injury. So now I'm going to get really sciencey. Brain injury here that comes from this spiritual amnesia, because again, amnesia is partial or total loss of memory, usually resulting from shock. Okay, we talked about the psychological disturbance. Now we're going to talk about the brain injury, and then we're going to talk about the illness. The brain injury and the illness are very linked together. Brain injury, all of these psychological disturbances, what do they cause? Trauma. They're traumatic experiences. So the trauma of this alters the structure and the function of your brain. So thus it causes an injury to your brain, and it alters neural pathways, and it disrupts the chemical balances that and processing information of your brain's functioning because of the trauma of this psychological disturbance. And so there's three main parts of the brain that are affected. And the first one is the amygdala. And the amygdala is the alarm system of the brain. It detects threats and triggers like fear responses. And what happens when it becomes overactive, it causes this exaggerated fear and emotional reactivity. So fear and anxiety, I mean, I think you can kind of see like they understand how some of the psychological disturbances literally cause fear and anxiety, and it's so consistent over time. So the amygdala becomes overactive. It impacts your hippocampus, and the hippocampus is the part of the brain that's responsible for memory processing, and it helps in distinguishing between past and present experiences. And I think that's a huge one. What happens with trauma is that part of the brain, the hippocampus actually shrinks. So trauma shrinks this part of the brain, thus impairing your ability to distinguish between safe and dangerous situations. And this is the part of the brain you don't want to shrink, because you want it to be able to distinguish between past and present experiences. Because if it's getting smaller, it doesn't have the capacity to remember be able to see like, oh, this happened, but right now this is not true either. And it impairs that ability to distinguish between safe and dangerous situations. And that part of the brain shrinks. And the final part of the brain here is the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain that's about rational thinking. It's responsible for impulse control. It helps in regulating emotional responses. So trauma, right? Because it causes like one of the amnesiacs. One of the ways that spiritual amnesia happens is brain injury, is through injuring the brain. This trauma that comes from the psychological disturbances that happen, that are being pushed for whatever reason. I know the reason, she knows the reason, but I don't want Zoom to kick me off right here, right now. It's your prefrontal cortex, it becomes underactive following this trauma. And it causes it becomes harder to manage fear, your responses to fear, and to engage in logical problem solving during moments of distress. And so those are the three parts of the brain for today's conversation that get activated in such a way, but it impacts your brain in other ways. But those three main parts are It has been proven, science has proven it, that those are the parts of the brain that get activated or are impacted when we have trauma responses. So the functional impact is also the brain chemistry changes here. You have neurochemical balance here. So you have these neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. They get disrupted, and that impacts your mood regulation and your motivation and your anxiety levels. So how the brain injury feeds into illness is that trauma impacts your nervous system regulation and body as a whole. And so there's these somatic symptoms, and they call them somatic because somatic means, there's not like a clear medical explanation for it.
Right.
But there's these somatic symptoms of muscle tension is common, gastrointestinal issues, and chronic pain. And when your nervous system is activated constantly, right? Your system is overwhelmed. You don't remember things because you are in this state of trauma and stress in such a way. So that is how spiritual amnesia is playing out, how it's impacting your brain and how it's also impacting your body. So I'm going to leave it there for today's conversation. Just kind of wanted to bring awareness to what's going on and how it's impacting you on such a level. And the reminder here is to breathe. It's all going to be okay. And I know you had some reflection questions that you wanted to provide to the people, or do you have anything else you want to add to the conversation?
No, that was the body's response and the change that it goes through.
Yeah.
Is deep. Trauma is deep. I know that word somatic.
Yeah, soma meaning in the body. It has to do with the body. Yeah.
I think that we'll get into depth on the next on how to do it, but you hit on some very, very, very body points and how the body actually deals with that of forgetting self or the fight or flight. It's just like, I give let me see, one example is the effect of being anything other than you, this feeling of not being able like to speak or to share the essence of yourself. And that happened in one of my careers, because of it's I just say it's a hell to the no. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. And I would say, like, we're talking about spiritual amnesia. What we're talking about is bigger, like just the trauma. Any type of trauma that you experience in your body is having an impact on your brain and thus your body. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important to, once you start to understand the physical impact and why it happens, I find it can give people a sense of like relief and like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. I'm not going crazy. Because some of you have people that have like these, what do they call them? Not chronic diseases, but the ones that just don't, they're just like, I don't know why this exists.
But that one was another one.
It's not chronic disease. It's something else. Maybe it is chronic. I'm overthinking it. But it helps you to start to understand like why you would have like tension in your body. Maybe like even the gastrointestinal issues. If you're in stress mode, your body has to choose what functions to process.
It helps to protect itself.
And digestion is the first one that gets it's not fully operational.
Yes, to all that. I mean, woo, yeah. I mean, you have these disorders, or you have, like, when you met that, I remember something called somatization disorder, and that's something that's totally bad to somebody when there's something they're experiencing that's causing, this here. And like, as you say, that some alchemy in the midst of the transition of becoming is really, really can be painful until you neutralize the cause to come back to self, or have body come back to healing. I'm just gonna say a little bit some before I hit my reflections. Where did I just made some notes here while you were talking, and to get the 3 reflections you have. But I wanted to make something clear. I mentioned something about a harmonic egg. I'm gonna give one of my guys a shout out down in Aberdeen, Maryland. You can look up what the harmonic egg is, which is a patented geometric chamber that uses energy and light and sound to promote healing and wellness in a way that is so freaking unique. It's awesome. And who I've had the opportunity and pleasure is to meet with Charles out of Chromosomatic Wellness, which is in Aberdeen, Maryland. It can be done in person or virtual. Um, so with that said, I will set up here with a reflection question or two. So with everything that we've shared, it's like, where in your life, and we just talked about this word prior, are you being loyal to a version of yourself that was built for survival, but no longer reflects your essence? Let's take a breath on that one.
Girl, that's all you need to reflect.
Should I leave it there? Should I leave it there? I got one more. This helps to create awareness without blame.
Yeah, go for the second one.
So the second one. If you stopped performing, proving, or protecting just for a moment, who would you naturally be? Goes from analysis to embodiment.
Oh, my favorite word.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite word. I don't know why I'm whispering. I have no idea why I'm whispering. Those are good. Those are good.
Let discomfort do its work. Silence is where remembering begins. And we'll get into that.
So
we begin.
This has been a very dense episode for sure. And so the next episode, I'm getting feedback again. The next episode, we're going to talk about how do we remember who we are? We recognize we have amnesia, and it's like, okay, who am I? How do I get there? How do I get clear on that? So we're going to dive in the next episode on finding our way back now that we recognize this amnesiatic state and how to shift out of it.
To embrace and really embrace and claim the dynamic essence that you are, that you need to become again, or to not even become, to actually reconnect, I'll say. Yeah. Reconnect in a way. And the feeling, you should feel lighter and somewhat different. The lighter, I say lighter. You are who you are. We just forgot. So now it's time to remember who the freak you are. again before the world told you who the hell you were supposed to be.
This should be an interesting ride, because I never know where my discussion is going to go. So buckle up, buttercups. So with that, I just want to thank each and every one of you that have made it to the end of this episode. We really appreciate you for listening and watching and being a part of this conversation. And do what you feel called to do around staying connected. I'm going to stop telling you what to do. Do what you're called to do. We hope to see you on the next episode. If you're on the podcast, we hope that you will hear us in conversation. So with that, again, thank you for being in conversation with me, Warrioress Ardeshir RN.
It's been a pleasure. Deep bow, my room.
So bye, everybody.
Peace.